Welcome to the Continuous Transformation Podcast, where spirit and science meet and creatively merge to give birth to the future. Disclaimer: high risk of life-transforming perspectives.
This is the best time to begin your continuous transformation process.
Your host is Advaitananda, a visionary, influencer, and scientist with a quantum physics background and more than 30 years' experience of yoga, tantra, and meditation practice and teaching. Episode 14: The Gift of Superior Masculinity. Inquiries by Foca Yariv. Deep inside the heart of every man is a hero waiting to rise. In this talk, Advaitananda unveils the gift of superior masculinity, a topic that is little understood nowadays, yet extremely important for both men and women. He is joined by Tantra teacher Foca Yariv, who represents the voice of the many men that have been guided by Advaitananda on their path of awakening masculinity.
How should men be educated nowadays with regard to intimacy, emotional connection with opposite sex?
The challenge in the bedroom is forging a strong character of the man. The need of the woman, which not by coincidence is a challenge for the man, is keeping the virility awake. So it's like nature made it so wisely. A woman is born perfect, but she needs to accept that. The man can become perfect, but he needs to accept the challenge. Acting from the heart without hesitation, one force of the forge, and taking full responsibility of what you did, second force. Caught between these two forces, the character of the man becomes like a diamond.
In a way, men now spontaneously is opposing a certain false stereotype of the man, the macho, and we long for the hero. This is why we long for Braveheart, Gladiator. We have this feeling, I want to stand for that. And then, as you say, sometimes we appear, I want to stand for something, and we don't find that something.
When you cultivate the heart, the love that you have for an ideal, when you stand up for a higher spiritual purpose, then you will not need motivation. You just do it. Hi, welcome to the Continuous Transformation Podcast. I feel to give some explanations about this podcast. I was asked recently by few of the listeners, what is this podcast about? I started to do this podcast as an answer to many of my students who were always wondering why such teachings as the ones we have in our esoteric school, are not made available to more people. Therefore, I decided to choose from the topics that are coming from the ones around me, topics suggested sometimes by the listeners, now by students, and to invite some of you, the listeners, to put these questions that are important for you or important for the public generally. In this way, instead of just showing some of these teachings, to debate about them practically with examples from the daily life. Therefore, I'm planning to expand this invitation to all the listeners now. So therefore, you are all invited to join me by suggesting a topic of your interest, and also to explain why this topic is important in your opinion. If you're interested, please leave a message here on my website or on the address that appears now on the screen. And we will reply to you, and according to the scheduling of these topics, you will be part of one of the future podcasts. For today's podcast, I chose a topic that is very hot, I would say, masculinity. And more importantly, I want to talk about masculinity as a gift, and I'm talking about the superior masculinity as a gift of today's world. Unfortunately, we hear a lot today, a lot of talks about masculinity, moreover about toxic masculinity, and I have to say that the rhetoric about this topic is often what is toxic and unilateral about it. It is the message that I hear about masculinity that becomes more toxic than the masculinity itself. Often I can hear opinions about men generalizing so unilaterally and biased in such extent that it makes me wonder, how are these opinions sometimes even legal? Many of such, I would say, shameless exposures of bias and one-sidedness would trigger a social media storm. For instance, if you would just replace the word man or masculine with woman or feminine or black or any other category of population. If you would do such replacement and publish exactly the same opinions, you will have an enormous storm of rejection in the media. However, when it comes to masculinity, nobody seems to care. In the beginning, I was sure, when I saw such things, that the lack of proper reaction from the strong, virile, and harmonious man is just due to an inborn generous tolerance that such a man is endowed with. And of course, I said, it's normal, we're gentlemen. But of course, such a person who doesn't get easily offended or triggered would have a moment when they will stand up and say enough. In time, I came to understand from my own experience growing in the side of masculinity that there is a problem with the masculinity after all. And it is not the problem that is claimed in what the new woke propaganda machine is claiming. Not at all. Actually, I didn't find almost anything they are claiming about masculinity today that could be seriously investigated. On the other hand, I found, and I will share with you some of these statistics, I found lots of problems with masculinity that really need our attention, especially our masculine attention. As a man, growing up was harder than we acknowledge, and that was a first observation. We were always told that being a man is easier, but actually I can tell that it was not easy at all to grow up as a man. And this has severe effects today on the development of boys to men. I have experienced directly the lack of specific education, the lack of masculine values and lack of models, masculine models, and the absence of a masculine culture that truly values masculinity. In fact, the only models that we have are some extremely strange, twisted models from porn or from movies, which are, anyway, very often neighbors. Therefore, as a teenager, I was launched in a society that already considered me as a potential rapist, a possible disturbance of the public order without any knowledge about me, after all. Practically, it was already a biased view. I was considered already an uneducated emotionally person, but also in the same time unfairly judged for this emotional retardedness that I have to admit I had. I was already not having any knowledge how to make love and how to be intimate or how to work with feelings, but always mocked by the women who seem natural in intimacy and with their emotions. So, of course, this kind of situation, I have to say, I have experienced it as a kind of biased and unfair to my development, but I didn't know the difference before I started to see also an alternative. Exposed to these strong impulses, but never taught how to deal with them, I was therefore practically in the woods, left alone there, and therefore being on one hand ashamed when having a strong erection, but also shamed more if having one. And this is how an average man grows up today. And even worse than this, I found out that when aiming to address these issues, your voice is covered by sometimes I have to say hysteric screams that you are egoistic and you should also talk about the needs of the others. And of course, nobody denies that this is important. But what about the needs that we as men have? And this is, in my opinion, why men were silent until now. Because their voice was always covered with this argument that is deeply biased. What about the others? Of course, the others are also important. But still, as you will see from statistics, there are problems with men that need to be addressed as well. And more importantly, you can't, or we can't do it as a human race without masculinity. Therefore, considering masculinity as toxic is by default an error of development. It is an attempt to degenerate the human race instead of regenerate. This is, in my opinion, the reason why masculinity have reached that far down the road, so to speak. Of course, I would say enough is enough. And more men today started to stand up and say, enough. Let's look into this issue and let's deal with it as men. Masculinity is, in my opinion, a wonderful gift to humanity when it is understood in its superior aspects. And we need to learn how to get back to its wonderness of masculinity instead of just trying to unconsciously attack it and even try to discard it, which, of course, is not even possible. And this does not deny, on the other hand, the amazing gift of feminine, for instance. We just need to take a moment of lucidity and to see the real situation. Personally, I found a path and also a teacher that, I have to confess, became a father figure for me when I was 20-year-old and helped me a lot to see the problems first. And of course, after the ordeal of being horrified by my own problems, I grew in strength, masculine strength, to overcome these problems, because that is in the development of men a necessity to face the problems, assume responsibility for them, and of course, the easy part, solving them. It was by growing in this way that I started to see the immense lack in education in real, genuine masculine culture today. In the last 3 decades, there were also other, I call them modern heroes, who dared to study the current situation of men and masculinity, and they dared to voice the results. Here is a little bit to put perspective into these elements, some results that shows just how dangerous is the situation regarding masculinity today. One of the authors from which I'm quoting is Dr. Zimbardo Philip, who was actually pioneering in voicing out, not in studying, but voicing out these findings with great courage, I would say. And very often he was attacked, as it stays well on a hero, by the others who didn't want to acknowledge such problems. 30% more boys than girls are likely to drop out of school or are outperformed by girls in every level of education. In average, boys are 10% less likely to get graduate degrees today. There, another point, boys that are making 2/3 of special education students. Boys are 5 times more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD syndrome, which is 500% over the girls. The lack of education about intimacy affects boys for far more than girls, for many reasons that probably we'll talk about today. The founder of the company of the foundation Make Love Not Porn, Cindy Gallup, said, quote, "We don't talk about sex, so porn is acting as our default sex education," end quote. And that is also a problem that is affecting boys much more than girls. The average sexual act in many places on earth takes place between 3 to 5 minutes. And of course, imagine what is happening in some cases to get such an average, because this is the average, and since we don't have minuses on the statistic, imagine where is what happens in many homes if the average is 3 minutes. So, of course, that is obviously a result of lack of education, lack of knowledge, and even models in intimacy. Porn industry, which is the fastest growing industry in US, for instance, is producing for every 400 new Hollywood movies, 11,000 new porn movies, just to see the demand. Brain of boys is more exposed to, or even today it is discovered that is rewired by easy access and the reward mechanism regarding porn. They reach to what is called today arousal addiction, which is a source of violence and toxicity when education is missing. On the other hand, emotional development of men is absent today. All emotional education, almost all, like with extremely few, almost negligible exceptions, is a feminine emotional education, or we can say feminine friendly. The feeling of idealism, patriotism, the feeling of sublime aspirations, which are typical for and needed fundamentally for the emotional education of men, they are today not only absent, they are mocked and sanctioned by the unconscious society around. Instead, boys are served a daydreaming type of emotionality that makes the feminine thrive, but lower the masculinity. The studies are showing that virility of men have decreased dramatically in the last 50 years. For instance, in a study between 1973 and 2011, the sperm count for men dropped 40%. In half of the men infertility cases, the cause cannot be found. Practically, it's a system error. It's a lack of understanding themselves. Now, interestingly, 93% of the infertile men are affected by the situation, quote, causing poor mental well-being and self-esteem issues, end quote. They're human beings. Somebody should look into that. On the other hand, we have an invasion of chemical substances that are responsible for what is called today gender bending effect. The phthalates and other substances are found, similar substances are found in the blood of 98% of Americans. And they have these gender bending effects. They're responsible for lowering the sperm count and diminishing the penis size. So if size matters, we should do something about that. Now, these substances are found even in the maternal milk today. They are in all plastic containers and used largely in packaging industry everywhere on the planet. The bisphenols, they are used also in manufacturing plastics, are functioning as an endocrine disruptor, and therefore they mimic estrogen in the body. Therefore, it's not a surprise that many men develop boobs today, the so-called man boobs. But of course, it's not only a discussion of aesthetics here, even though in some cases it is a comfort or a discomfort. But it is also a matter of functionality. Today, it was determined that the fertility worldwide drops 1% per year. Of course, some will say a little bit superficial. Yeah, anyway, we're so many, so a little bit of infertility will not harm. And could be a solution, but it is fair? I wonder. 80% of teenagers have in their bloodstream gender-bending substances that affects only the males. Yet 80% of teenagers have in a proportion, significant proportion, these gender-bending substances. To this, we also have to add, to this grim picture, we add the fatherless boys phenomenon that slowly starts to make its way to public awareness due to this, what I call modern day heroes, men who started, and women who started to talk about these things and start to raise an alarm. Mother was always closer to the attention as she's the one bringing a new life into the world. And therefore, slowly, the father was falling in a strange position of an almost futile accessory of the new life. Practically, he's the toxic carrier of the seed. Now, recent studies show, without a shred of doubt, that while mother is having her unchallenged role in bringing a new life into the world, the father is essential to ensure the quality of that life. And here are some statistics. I'll go very fast. You can find them around on the net anyway. 63% of young suicides are from fatherless homes. 85% of children with behavior disorders are from fatherless homes. It's 20 times the average. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. It's 32 times the average of the population. 80% of rapists with anger problems are from fatherless homes, 14 times the average. 71% of school dropouts come from fatherless homes, 9 times the average. 75% of adolescent patients to drug abuses come from fatherless homes, 10 times the average. 85% of all youths in prison come from fatherless homes, which is 20 times the average. Now, daughters without a father involved home are 53% more likely to marry as teenagers, 711% more likely to have children as teenagers, 164% more likely to have premarital birth, and 92% more likely to get divorced themselves. But before you react, dismissing all these statistics with what I call a jolly joker argument of, quote, gender opportunity gap, end quote, please take a breath and realize that the same statistics are valid in countries where this gap is minimal. Same proportion, same enormous proportion, which underlines, without any doubt, that the fatherless boy phenomena is real. Now, of course, to be a father, one needs first to be a man. It is a part of the masculine gift to the world, and we ignore it today, and therefore we can see another side of the consequences. Personally, I've been observing this situation of masculinity for all my life today. Since I was a teenager, I could see this gap, as I explained in the beginning. Now, in 2003, I first time organized a camp for intensive training for men, which was in the same time a success and a warning, because what we've seen in that camp, the amount of problems that men starts to show when given a proper environment to develop is quite scary in the beginning, positively challenging later. This topic remained in my attention, and because of its importance, it became an important chapter in the esoteric Tantra Yoga course that I have the honor to write together with my wife Adina and under the careful guidance of my mentor Greg. Today I invited to bring his questions and other men's questions on this topic, a friend of mine and a Tantra teacher, a man who is guiding other men to restore their masculine presence in the world, a teacher in Tara Yoga Center in London, Foca Yariv. Welcome, Foca.
Hi, Vaitananda. Thank you for the insightful and slightly sad opening of this talk.
No, I just wanted to make sure that the listeners are either ready to hear more or they turn away, because unfortunately on this topic today there is a lot of hysteria instead of this calm, lucid approach of the man. So for this reason I wanted to drop these statistics, because statistics are not lying. And of course, now we are ready to see also the very good part of the gift of superior masculinity today. Now, I just want to say about Foca that he is not only teaching yoga and tantra, but he is a fervent practitioner himself, and he is also coordinating groups of men in London and around, I think, but you will explain about that, where in this way he gathered a lot of these questions and challenges men are facing today. We previously talked together in a previous podcast about demystifying Tantra, so therefore now we are ready for a hotter topic. So, Foca.
Thank you very much, Ava. It's very insightful, and I'm looking at this statistic, also preparing myself. You kind of realize how thick is the problem. You cannot ignore it. And we only see, as you said, only a part of it, and I hope somehow in this talk we can see the full issue and also the gift that you mentioned, because it seems to me that that gift is more of a curse. And if I look at the situation here in the UK, 75% of all people who have heart attacks, men. The number one reason of men's death beneath the age of 35 is suicide. Before anything else, 4 out of 5 cases of suicide is men. One out of 8 men suffers from a sort of a mental illness. 1 out of 11 here in England has alcohol dependency. I mean, it's so thick, it's so overwhelming, this situation. And you think, oh, it's just statistic, but I'm now having groups of men for over a decade, and I see them. I see men with porn addiction, alcohol addiction, depression, suicidal tendencies, and they come, many of them, and they seek for help. Now, I was wondering if you can give your perspective about it. How did we reach there? Because you described it as a gift. And even more interesting, of how did we reach there? What would be the wise solution for men nowadays to get out of this situation, which now, if I look at the statistic, is not a gift, it looks like a curse to be a man nowadays.
Yeah, that was hinted in also in my introduction when I said that today we reach to this situation. Among other things because men are educated, and not only educated, they feel deep inside the need to focus more upon themselves and to find the problem. And then it fit perfectly with the narrative of the society around, which started to mock them, to put them down. And then, of course, it was like two forces going in the same direction. A strong man doesn't get triggered, doesn't get involved in chatting and arguing with other people around. When they say you're stupid, a strong man will just try to look, maybe you're right. Let me first seek for the stupidity in what I'm doing before I try to argue with you. Why are you saying that to me? And actually, taking advantage of that, the society started to eliminate the masculinity, the masculine values, unconsciously, I would say. No? On the other hand, the feminine values are still present there, and actually we start to reevaluate them. But I see today a kind of opposite imbalance. Now we look very much, let's reevaluate feminine, which is absolutely fantastic, but we don't look that we left behind the heroes, the men. You know, a hero was walking straight through his village because he thought always the cowards never existed. We are all men. But the cowards existed, and the cowards attacked from behind. A hero never defended his behind before in the ancient time. And therefore some people figure out you can poison the hero. We can stab him from behind because he will never think of you less than himself. Because that's the code. That's how you forge a strong character that even fit with your biochemistry. So for this reason, that kind of attitude became, in a world that is less challenging, became a disadvantage, an obvious disadvantage. To this, you also have to consider the fact that in order to shape the character, the masculine character, you need to have sublime ideals. You need to have aspirations. You need to have positive challenges. Well, today we try to eliminate positive challenges. We get triggered to the gym eventually. I haven't seen it, but I wouldn't be surprised. You will sue the gym because every day you go and lift the weights and tomorrow the weights are on the floor again. And you get offended by that. Why? Why don't you put them up and nail them on the wall there so they stay always up? And honestly, this is how we grow today to learn. Any challenge is considered to be negative. Any challenge is considered to be something to be eliminated, without realizing that the very essence of masculinity grows in strength by some positive challenges. And then, of course, the result is instinctively an uneducated man, uneducated in terms of masculinity. I'm not talking uneducated in terms of physics or mathematics, but uneducated as a man is becoming toxic to himself. Toxic masculinity poisoned the man, first of all. And then, yes, starts to manifest around in what? In a search for some misplaced ideals. That's why gangs of men, they have this feeling, if you see the interviews with these gangs which end up in jail eventually, and then you get horrified by what they did. Then somebody goes there and asks them, why did you do that? They always display some crooked, strange ideals there, all kind, the feeling of belonging to a flag, to a uniform, to a boss, to a leader, to something. But people are mocking unconsciously that, because this is part of the masculine culture. Exactly as today we're saying, but it's nice to be soft and open and embracing, which is growing even hormonally, the feminine side of you. If you want to have virility, stand, which, by the way, the word itself, the expression itself, stand for an ideal. Now, of course, the science is cultivate ideals so the men can stand without destroying the other people around them. Because if you just let them like that, uneducated, with zero ideals or some very bizarre things that they are proposed in the society today, of course they will find all kind of misplaced idealism that is there, ripe for the taking. You see, manipulation today, who is falling first for the mass manipulation of tyrants and governments and so on?
Us, unfortunately.
We are the candidates. Statistics, I don't think ever somebody dare to make a statistic, because it will be 100 to 0. So it will not be a statistic, it will be unanimity. Men are falling for it. Why? For a very simple reason. It must be a need. The answer is already there. Yes, it is a need. A man who is lacking perspective is self-poisoning. Overeating, in case of men, you said 4 out of 5, heart attacks or...
And 2 out of 3...
Suicide. Clear why men are committing suicide far more than women. Very simple. Some people, I even heard the opinion, because they are stronger so they can kill themselves easier. No, come on. We have methods that can be very soft today. Not that I'm suggesting, I'm just saying that it's absolutely not a problem to succeed in that issue. But it seems like men are successful in all the bad things. Exactly. All you need to do is to take that successful character and put it in the right perspective. Instead of taking life, how about contributing to give life? But when you live a meaningless life, when the society don't need you as a man, you are by default a rapist. You are by default a person who is creating emotional disturbance. You feel you don't fit emotionally because, yes, I would like a good challenge. And then I'm told, you're such a toxic man. Really? Did you ever look at me? Did you ever look at the species, the men who fought and died for ideals, for you to walk freely, for us to have a society that reached to cosmos and so on? Why the majority of the people who did that were still the men? Because they were in their development, they need to lift those weights. It's part of their need. Therefore, the evolution of the technology and everything is a byproduct of the need. That's all. But when you look at it like this, then you start to understand, wait a second, maybe we should just encourage it instead of mocking people when they display all these aspects. So that's why we reach to that, like every other deviation in the society, by ignorance.
It was kind of a gradual process, little by little, we deviate, until we reach to a place where, the statistic is in our face. Nobody can ignore it.
Exactly, and it's getting worse every year. These are statistics already from 5 years old or so, but now it's getting much worse. And the bad thing is that we do not acknowledge the need of masculinity. We consider practically, and I heard it from so many places, we don't even need you. We can have children without you. We don't need you. And I would address this question to the feminine. What would you think if you will hear the statement from guys to start to say, we don't even need you? How would you feel about it? And it's not about feelings here. Oh, you hurt my feelings. No, it's not about that. It's about how would that person who is actually developing in a nourishing environment of need, not a nourishing environment of enough, no, of need. We need you. Oh, let me, what do you need me to do? Die for you? Sure. I can do that. Sacrifice my comfort for you, stand up and bring you a glass of water. I can do that. No, I don't need you. I can do it myself. Of course you can do it. You're not handicapped. But then what shall I do? Because in the end, fatherless syndrome, for instance, shows clearly you would need me at some point for some freak accident of nature if you want to ignore every science. Yeah. Of course, it's not an accident. It's the wisdom of the Creator that put there exactly the same amount of attention in the feminine as well as in the masculine. Now, we tend to forget completely the masculine fast, rapidly, I would say, and then to develop the feminine in ways to replace almost masculine. I was watching recently this new very much communistic development of Hollywood style, very much censorship. You can't do this kind of movies. You cannot do this kind. It's exactly what I've seen when I grew up in communism. They just call it differently. Also, communism was called differently. And they display these new heroes. I don't know if you noticed, most of the movies, are feminine heroes. But strangely, they are displaying masculine characters. And I heard a lot of women complaining, well, I can't identify myself with that. I'm trying to become that heroine. But honestly, I feel a bulge in my pants if I if I do that.
Yeah, if they play Wonder Woman, they don't fit in that. I mean, Gal Gadot is great, but it's just...
Yeah, and the whole rhetoric is retarded to this fact, I can do it. It's not a problem if you can do it or not. It's not a problem, exactly as guys now are saying, we can also carry a baby, and with some freak surgical modifications, yes, a body of a man can carry a child. But really, that's the last thing you want to do with your life now? Since nature built you to do amazing things, to bring amazing gifts to the world, and the feminine body to give amazing gifts to the humanity and to the world, why not developing those sides? Yeah. Anyway, I'm just debunking this argument, which is practically the only argument that is thrown generously in all these debates today. And unfortunately, behind that, the men are left silently. And because of the character of the men, the real men, the still harmonious, strong, virile men, they're sitting there silently nodding their head, say, that's childish. And they turn their head and move about with their life. And those happy who meet such men and they are together with them and they are gifted with what? With masculinity, not with the absolute meaning of life. No, just with masculinity. But they're unfortunately less and less today. And that's a problem. That's the reason.
Unfortunately, I would like to continue with another question that it continues a bit the sad story, and it is men in the bedroom. One of my colleagues is a doctor, and she says that 1 of every 4 men beneath the age of 40, is already in need of Viagra in the bedroom. They have already erectile problem. Here in the UK, average time of lovemaking is 19 minutes, but I think because they are polite, so it takes a few more minutes until they take off their clothes. And usually they are very drunk when they reach there, so it takes a while longer. But it is still a very sad story. We look at pornography. There is 5 to 8% of the men who have already addiction to that dopamine release, 10 to 12 hours a week looking at pornography. We look at the internet, 12% of the websites is about sex, most of them is for men, and men is trying to replace the fact that they cannot do it in the bedroom in pornography. And we also find the sad situation in which most men, this is where they receive their sexual education, as you mentioned before, which is a sad story. I know on myself, when I lost my virginity, I was like, all this fuss for these 2 minutes? I mean, it's a ripoff. Someone here has lied to me. It cannot be that it is so disappointing after all this fuss that they made around it. And I realized I was so mal-educated. Now, from your perspective, what could be the solution? How should men be educated nowadays with regard to intimacy, emotional connection with the opposite sex? How would we go about that?
Yeah, that is that is a sad story and a good challenge for the man, because reality is that the challenge in the bedroom is forging a strong character of the man if he's taking it, if he's taking it seriously. And that is and as you said, many are polite, and many of the statistics are even worse than what you just mentioned there. But let's not steer the pot too much, and we stay with that polite one. However, the solution is very simple. You know, this virility problem, erectile dysfunctions, or how they call it nicely, is very much a matter of not knowing yourself, not knowing your body, not knowing your needs, your cravings, also not knowing what to do in intimacy, not knowing how to be virile, because again, all the education is how to be nice and gentle, of course, which is very nice, but what exactly to do? And how to control the urges without suppressing them, without feeling guilt, without feeling the shame of having an erection. You see, that's why I said, as a boy, you grow up, if you have an erection in the wrong place, my goodness, you are traumatized for life. Did you hear any parents or any public school to say, oh, look at you have bravo, let's everybody applaud our colleague here who has an erection? You know, what were you thinking of? Share with us. You know, I'm saying this as a contrast because, of course, just saying it, we start to jiggle. Oh, my goodness. Oh, you cannot say that. But you can and you should, because it's the shame of the masculine sexuality, the shame of the masculine body is one of the problems. Instead of recognizing the beauty of the masculinity, the beauty of the virility, we get scared of it. We get scared of our own penis, our own lingam, and we don't even know how it works. And of course, in intimacy, it gets worse because not only that you don't know what to do with your own, but then the other one is expecting you to do something. And then it's like, whoa, I don't even know how to take it out from the pants, and you're asking me to put it somewhere. So this is a very big problem of education. Now, interestingly, women are far more in touch with their own bodies, in touch with their own feminine side. They even educate themselves far more careful than the men. Of course, they are needed. They need to do that. Yeah. So practically, they are more careful also because even physiologically they are inclined for it. But the men, they seem to be fine. But actually, that's the problem. We don't acknowledge it. And I have to confess, I grew up in a university family, in a university academic environment. But anything related to intimacy, I got it from books. I have to go to my father with a book and ask him questions because he didn't tell me anything. Of course, he was sending me off, saying, you are in the 2nd grade. Where did you find that book? Put it back. It's true. I grew up in a library. Practically 3 walls of my bedroom were covered with books. And there were also books of sexual education, as they call it then, because my parents were very learned people. And I started to read. Perhaps premature. I don't deny that. But still, I remember my father's reaction, being ashamed that his son is reading that. You don't need that. But I do need that, because obviously you don't say anything. And soon I will face, I'm facing urges, I'm facing desires that I have no idea what they are. Yeah. So and man is far more affected by this syndrome of illiteracy in intimacy than women. There is a big discrepancy there, and that's the reason why this psychological impotency, as they call it, for 40 up to 60% of men suffers of these erectile dysfunctions in a way or another. And my experience with groups of men, yours already, because you have started already long ago, is that most of these dysfunctions vanish in thin air when the man starts to learn about himself. When he learns, for instance, to separate orgasm from ejaculation, when he starts to realize that these are 2 totally different processes, while orgasm is an energetic and even spiritual experience, ejaculation is just a reflexes in his body, and he managed to control it without suppressing it, and in this way experience practically the pleasure that he have never imagined but always knew is possible, then that is a man who can't be toxic That is a man who cannot be a rapist or an abuser of porn, for the very simple reason that he is so much more fulfilled. But again, this kind of environment that we have created around intimacy, interestingly, is affecting masculinity far more than femininity. So that's why, man did it to himself in many ages of humanity, because he lost the view that intimacy and eros is something profoundly beneficial and spiritual. When man lost it, he found it disturbing, because indeed, sex is disturbing when you have aspirations. And this is the reason why male athletes, before important competitions, are recommended not to have sex. But not the sex is the problem, the ejaculation in the end. So male athletes, or before important flights, flight hunting pilots, and all this very highly demanding performance, male performance, is requested that, because ejaculation is draining the male body completely from even some fundamental nutrients that is affecting his lucidity and intelligence even. Not to mention all other energetic effects that each of us have felt. So that kind of illiteracy is affecting drastically the man. But once he discovered, hey, there's an alternative to that, which is very simple. You separate these two. Now you are welcome to make love the whole night if you want. And then you will have erection the whole night, because ejaculation doesn't appear. The drainage of the body doesn't appear. You don't need it while you have orgasmic states. So that's something that we can see as a solution today. It's quite easy. I've seen it. I've never seen a man who, learning these things, still continue to have such problems, unless it's something physiological also already established. So it needs a little bit of treatment, attention. But I'm talking about the statistics here, not the few cases which are, let's say, more unfortunate.
So you say that the solution for the bedroom is men educating themselves, men coming together and having a certain, even strong bond, brotherhood, we can say, and coming out from a certain, I just cannot, a certain impotency, which appears also at the sexual level, but first of all is an impotency of their consciousness, of the spirit.
Of the spirit, yeah.
They just said, I cannot kind of state. So they need to
but you see, exactly. We are, it's a vicious circle. We don't pick up ideals because we feel weak. And therefore, we lower the threshold, so we lower the standards. But we lower the standards, we have even less power, because that's how masculine power grows. And because of that, we even lower more the standards, because now I really feel weak. And then, of course, that is a syndrome that is almost generalized today on the planet, and it drags down the one side of the planet, unfortunately, the masculine side, rapidly, I would say, and is degenerating it. So yes, your synthesis is very good. Bringing together this masculine culture of the positive challenges, of the higher ideals, find ideals. And many men are asking here, and you know that. Many men are asking, fine, give us a list of ideals. Not to give you a list of ideals, but pick up a spiritual development challenge. This is for a man. That's the reason why throughout history, many people on this planet who pursued spiritual growth were men. Because it's a byproduct of their need. A man needs an ideal. Where to find an ideal? Let's say you're born in a palace, Buddha. What to do? You are already accomplished physically. Well, then you go for what? Enlightenment. You go for the challenge of giving up all the comforts of the palace and find out the root of sufferance in the world. And then you become the Buddha. So the point is here, and I've seen it in myself, you probably saw it in yourself. At some point, we will, when we raise as men, developing as men, we will need to look beyond the horizon. Beyond the horizon of materialism, for instance. Yes, you can become a very successful man with material goods or in business. But when you are honest enough, you need to keep going. And then what? But then you start to have another level of pursuit of spiritual values, perfecting your morality, perfecting your concentration, perfecting your continence, your capacity to make love and become a perfect lover. In this respect, the need of the woman, which not by coincidence is a challenge for the man, is keeping the virility awake. So it's like nature made it so wisely that if you're a strong man in your character, virile in your character, and take up the challenge of the woman, so to speak, of making her happy, making her multi-orgasmic, you by default become virile. So it's like, it's so wisely construed already. But of course, we refuse that and we say, yeah, what? Do it yourself.
So you say from the vicious circle, it will become something that will constantly challenge ourselves and will grow and opposing to that.
Yeah, it's a virtuous circle exactly. Instead of a vicious circle.
Then if we want, already it was a bad situation, as we mentioned in the beginning, the gift that was becoming a curse. And then a few years ago with the whole Weinstein story and the hashtag #MeToo, we find that like if beforehand was difficult, now it became even harder. And I heard from many men who came with the feeling that they are afraid to approach women. And then I hear women who are complaining because men are not approaching. And men stop being active. And I see more and more men who are afraid even if they say something. Oh my God, they might think that I want her. But you do want her. This is why you say something. And actually, she wants you to want her. I mean, she wants you to make the first step. She will feel very unconquered if she asks you for her number, for your number. I mean, she wants you to go and ask her. And then somehow we develop what I see very often is this kind of wuss stereotype. Instead, beforehand, there was the kind of cowboy, strong masculine one, which was
the
macho, a bit of a false stereotype. And now kind of we move to the wuss. And like, the stereotype of men is like, I don't want to hurt anybody, I don't want to cause any problem, we have to consent. I mean, I agree, everybody needs to, you agree on the things, you have mutual consent that comes from the heart, but now everything became so formal, so demasculating for the men. I mean, it's like, you feel like even in men-women interaction, they become weaker and weaker. What is the solution for the Me Too, for us men? How can we stop being afraid of a woman?
I take the Me Too movement as a good challenge, honestly, because, of course, it reveals some problems generated by the interaction between men and women. In my opinion, it is mutual problems that were generated out of ignorance, men to women, women to men. But the most important thing here is the fact that the strength of the man is in his heart. With other words, girls, you cannot hate us as much as we can love you. Period. So, this is the strength. If the man will stand up for his heart, and interestingly in Tantra, ancient times, they already said that virility of the man is in his heart, not in his pants. It starts there. And today, of course, we have this sexualized macho man. It's wrong. Guys, stop it. You're a monkey. And you can do much more. You can do much more than being an ape. You have a heart. That's the difference. Guys bypass the heart and they become smart. And that's wrong also. They are smart apes. No, there is something in between, which is the heart of a man. The heart of a man is the one that can make a hero. That is the heart that you love in a man. That is the heart that you love in a hero and make a statue for generations to remember that man. Not because he was a virile macho. No, the men are remembered not for their virility, except Casanova. But even that guy, we will see perhaps in another show. The man is remembered for what? For his deeds that come from his heart. For his sacrifice, for his ideals that he stood up for his amazing dedication to what? To the community. That's a man with a heart, after all. To the community, to his lover, to his mother, to his friends. That's the man. That's the gift to the world. So, coming back to this Me Too movement, in my opinion, Me Too movement is the cry of femininity for guys to wake up. And you see, sometimes in the feminine nature is this wake-up call that is like an alarm clock but doesn't tell you what are you waking up for. You know, it's just ringing and the first instinct is like, whoa, what happens? Then you wake up and you realize, I wake up because I have that meeting. But the alarm clock doesn't tell you what are you. It's just screaming there in your head. Me too. And then you have to wake up because, yes, many of the things reported there are what? Are situations that men generated out of lack of love, out of lack of touch with their heart, out of the fact that they were sexually smart, but no heart. And therefore, when, of course, and it's true, is biased, is ignoring the gift of masculinity, is very much unfair. But hello, heroes very well were appreciated post-mortem. Let's not forget. Most of the heroes of this planet died unknown and were appreciated post-mortem. It's part of the hero. So it's not like, would you like to give your life because we will write books about you if you do that. And look, it's a golden statue that is waiting for you. Huh? What do you say? Huh? That's a good deal? Okay, let's go. No. That's on the contrary. You go there, you might give your life, and they will even mock you. Huh? So in 100 years, people will say, wait a moment. What you did or what that hero did was essential, was fundamental for our growth, our development, and so on. But the hero died without knowing, and yet his heart was strong enough. He didn't need motivation. He didn't need to be acknowledged as a hero. And that's the problem today. One of the poisonous things that men are indulging in today is the motivational scheme. What's in it for me? Well, it's not about that. The heart doesn't judge in these ways. And when you cultivate the heart, the love that you have for an ideal, when you stand up for a higher spiritual purpose, then you will not need motivation. You just do it. And that's how you forge a strong masculine character. And interestingly enough, this is proven to generate a surge in masculine hormones. So it's a healthy surge in masculine hormones today.
So we can say that we are, in a way, men now spontaneously is opposing a certain false stereotype of the man, the macho, and we long for the hero. This is why we long for Braveheart, Gladiator. We have this feeling, I want to stand for that. And then, as you say, sometimes we appear in, I want to stand for something, and we don't find that something. Otherwise,
exactly.
We don't find an archetype to follow. Who would you suggest that we follow as men? What would be your indication to cure the stereotype with beneficial archetypes? How did you do it?
Well, gradually we will need to rediscover a correct path in the world with higher ideals, higher than save in order to have, higher than keep your safe life but not living it, and so on. So we need to dare to look beyond that. That kind of attitude, save in order to have a safe nest, is a typical attitude when you want to have a nest and to grow your little babies inside, which is correct if you have eggs. But if you need to build a nest, then you need to think of the whole frame around it and acknowledge it and see the future and learn from the past. A man who doesn't learn the past and he denies it, see what happens today, fighting with statues like Don Quixote with the windmills. Yeah, a man who denies the past is not ready for the future. It's not ready. And then I hear even some people saying today, that's good because you are staying in the present moment. You're not. You're trapped in a dream, not the present. So that's the issue today. Yes, we should discover new horizons. On the other hand, my advice is find a master and follow, because the inner journey is guaranteed. It's guaranteed that is giving you positive challenges. Perhaps the society around you is not ready to transform so dramatically. Fine. It's understandable in some situations. Not in all situations, don't indulge. But in some situations. But you still have a lot to fix inside of you. You still have a lot to conquer and grow inside. There is the uphill situation inside of every man. Take the intimacy. We are illiterate in intimacy. Start to acknowledge that. Start to learn how to make your lover ecstatically happy. But not because you take Viagra, but because you have a heart that replaces Viagra. And then you will be surprised. That which is in your pants follows the heart very, very fast. Because you see, it's looking up to the heart. If the heart is strong, it looks up to the heart. And therefore, it's enough for her. And that's just a way to put the problem. Men today should dare more. Men today should stand more, but not standing in a violent way. A hero stands silent. A hero doesn't need acknowledgement. Look, I'm here. Please acknowledge me. Look, put me on the social media. Make a statue of me. No. Actually, very often, I'm quite sure our talk here will trigger a lot of debates, a lot of things. Even though the other talk, Demystifying Tantra, goes anonymously. Why? Who can understand those things? But when it comes to, you attack my masculinity, you said men are good. Wow, they will jump all the people who are trying to hide behind this comfort of toxic masculinity, because yes, putting that label is excusing us for taking up the challenge. We just refuse it. We throw it up through the window and we don't look at it without realizing a man who doesn't take responsibility for himself is losing his masculinity. So, yes, this is actually what I call the forge of a man. The two forces are acting from the heart without hesitation, one force of the forge, and taking full responsibility of what you did. Second force. Caught between these two forces, the character of the man becomes like a diamond.
It's fantastic. And out of it comes the idea of the Rite of Passage. I'm thinking about it in my tradition. Theoretically, it was the Bar Mitzvah. Jewish. So theoretically, when you're 13, you go there, your father slaps you, and he says, "Thank God for getting me rid from your burden. You're supposed to be a man." When I was 13, very little of my manhood was awakened. I was very confused, and still I didn't have any exterior rite of passage. But I remember one night, 20 years ago, when I was 18, I was meditating, and it was a special moment, and I realized being a man is a responsibility. And I remember that as a very clear rite of passage. Afterward came many rites of passage in which the boyhood died and the manhood grew. Nowadays, I look at many people, they are in their 40s, 50s, still boys. They haven't went through the rite of passage. My question is in twofold. First first of all, a bit more personal, what was your rite of passage? And secondly, what will be the rite of passage that you can inspire men to take? You spoke about the inner journey. What form will it take for a man?
My rite of passage. My rite of passage happened in 2 stages. The first rite of passage, I fell in love when I was a teenager, and I went to ponder upon this feeling that I have and how hopeless I felt in that moment in front of this immense challenge of realizing the polar dynamic of life. Now, I formulated exactly like that, and my father found me on the balcony, sitting there, crying and tired of all this, because I was for 2 weeks under big turmoil. And he came to me, he asked me, what is happening with you? I explained to him, and he looked at me and he said, if you cry for this reason, you're gonna be a fine man. In that moment, I didn't know much about this, but I felt in his attitude there is something he knows. Something he knows. And it worked in me. It was like a drop that started to dig inside of me, a lot of cavities in my heart and so on. And the completion of that was when I met Adina. You know Adina, my wife. That was, in my opinion, the moment when I started the journey to manhood. It was quite late, I have to say. But before that, any experience that I had was still a boyish experience that didn't have consistency yet, didn't have the right guidance. And in that respect, also my father was not equipped, not knowing what to say practically to me. And then I met Greg, my mentor, my master, and then he started to teach me, not me personally, of course, all of us, we were thousands of people around him, and I started to learn theoretically, but then I met her. And then she started to see, and the first thing that she told me was, you're cheating. Me? What? What are you talking about? And she was so straight in her feminine way. She said, you're cheating. You're not a man. Well, now, you know her. She's such an amazing woman. She's such a full woman. Yeah. And then to be told like that by her, yeah. The mother of the erection dies together with the father of the erection. And yeah. But then she was patient with me to revive after the little coma that I entered in my masculine confidence and everything. And then this I consider to be the final stage of this rite of passage. So it started with these words of my father on top of a first crisis, so to speak, and then it boiled for a few years, and then it ended with this first moment when actually, imagine before I knew I was making love, so what I was calling that, making love, which was, well, sport, but good sport, according to the opinions. But then she told me, no, this is cheating. And the moment she said this is cheating, and I tried to learn the real thing, I haven't had an erection for 2.5 months. I didn't remember what is that. And it's because I realized how illiterate I was. But she was wise enough and patient enough. And she started to let me, took me like a child almost, like teaching me the basics, how to feel myself, my body, how to pay attention to different sensations. And then I remember we were visiting a friend, and that was the night. after 2.5 months, the blanket was standing, the tent was there, so to speak, and then she was happy. And yeah, that was, I remember she went straight to the office in that morning because we saw the sunrise together. And then I was asking her, wow, what will you do today? And she said, I will be so happy. Don't worry about me. So, yeah. Rite of Passage. Now, what to do? What to do? It's, you see, very often men today, they indulge into the woman of their dreams, which stays only in their dreams, in the posters in their room, or in the pictures archive in their computer. A man should dare to find her. She's out there, sometimes covered by a few layers of unwanted attention or unwanted bodily things because she is waiting too much. But you are there to unfold. You are there to help her to get out and to also give her the confidence to become feminine again. And that is the rite of passage. A man's rite of passage is when he stands for what he is. He is the pole, he is the consciousness. And it's very hard to put light of consciousness in everything. You are the party pooper, as they call it. You are the one who is destroying the party of the ego. And that's what it is. It's true, you're the one putting the light everywhere, even in the corners where you don't like to look, not to mention others. So therefore you should start with yourself. You should put light of awareness in everything that you do. Dare to see the real standards. Don't lower the standards so you feel good about yourself. Raise yourself to the cosmic standards. And that is the rite of passage. And in a certain way, I don't think the rite of passage for the men is one. And from what I experienced, the rite of passage, at every threshold of initiation, there is another rite of passage for the men. For a woman, for instance, the rite of passage is to discover herself in all her wonderful aspects, to accept that she's wonderful. A woman is born perfect, but she needs to accept that. The man can become perfect, but he needs to accept the challenge.
Yes, brilliantly said, and I fully feel it inside of me, and I can see it in all the men that I've been guiding and being friends with now, some of them for more than a decade, how they had to go through all of that, and they are forged in that fire, that relationship, and integrating relationship and life and work and inner work, how all of them makes, or they are kind of the wood in their fire that makes them stronger and stronger as human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
If we have a moment for another question, what is the harmonious relationship between men? What is the role of men's brotherhood? Nowadays we see many men, they gather together around sports. Here in England, Tottenham, Arsenal, Manchester, that's what brings men together. And sometimes politics, but nowadays politics is a bit more of a bore because, you know, people feel they cannot change much. Now, in a demonstration, they feel a little bit hot.
Well, in England, you also have Masonic lodges, which is very much populated by men, which is also because men feel the need to make a difference, and then they start to make occult groups who try to influence from the shade what they cannot influence from open. This is another, how to say, side effect of misunderstood masculinity and misplaced ideals. Yeah.
My question is, like, seeing this men, and now we are sitting here, a group of men, and it seems like in the beginning men feel like it's an AA meeting. All the men sit together. You feel like raising up, I have a problem because what am I supposed to do with other men in a room? We're not watching football, we're not drinking beer. What am I doing here? We are completely inadequate to sit like this with men, they feel like. But yeah. I wonder, what is the right way of men being together? What is the right approach for this brotherhood?
You see, that's why what I was referring to, lack of masculine culture. What you described there, this AA type of meeting of men curing each other's toxic masculinity or trying to deny it or accept it in a funny way, is actually far from being the solution. But we don't know it, or we are awed in such situations because we don't have a masculine culture. Men stand together working for the same ideal, practicing together, for instance, in silence. That's a meeting of a man, which is wonderful. Throughout the years, 30 decades of practice, teaching in university, coming back to practice, practicing intensely, and teaching again and teaching Tantra, writing Tantra courses, going worldwide teaching. I can tell you that the best experiences I have with men are two. One, practicing silently, meditating together. Oh, so wonderful. Second, even though I would put this one first, but depends on taste, loving together the same woman. It's the closest you can feel intimate to a man when you generously love together the same woman. Now today we have misplaced pride because we don't have pride anymore. We don't stand for ideals. We show each other car, women, all this, which is primitive, like ape. Again, the ape is back. And instead of loving them, we treat them as objects, sexual objects. Why? Because we try to show them. When you love them, you don't show. It's not yours, first of all. You just love them. You adore them. And when two men adore the same woman, the communion, she becomes like a conductor between the hearts. Their hearts suddenly communicate in ways that honestly, it's very difficult for a character of the man forged in the battle of inner transformation to be so intimate with another character forged in the battle of inner transformation as it is when the feminine element is brought in between by love. And loving together, and why not? Making love together with the same woman is honestly an extraordinary closeness between men, but generally standing together. That's the reason why. Put some guys together who served in the army. What is the thing they will say the most? Stories from the army. Honestly, I have some great stories from my time in the army. Yeah, because there you stood for something. It's true, again, misplaced sometimes and superficial very often. Or sports, you said. Why do men stand for Manchester United? Sorry, I don't, whatever. One name there. Yeah, not that it's a bad team. Probably is great. I heard it's very great, and I watched some, and there are great people there, of course. But they try to create a kind of a feeling of standing together for an ideal. Now, of course, the players, they have a great time. The players, they stand together for their team, for the colors of the club or whatever they feel belonging to. But the 80,000 fans around, they are just imagining. They are imagining because they are in lack of something to stand for. So that's why the togetherness of men rebuilding the city, cleaning out the streets from poverty, from standing for against social injustice, but in a correct way. Not in the way that is today, the wokeness, which is so far from masculinity. Not by coincidence, one of the main targets of wokeness today is masculinity. Why? Because it's totally out of any masculine touch. And yeah, guys should stand up to repair what? Masculinity. And then we will feel the togetherness. That's why groups like you are leading. I think they're extremely useful. And I see now more around the Tantra courses around the world now that more and more groups of men are gathering. And in our school, this Vira is the Sanskrit name for the spiritual hero, are developing more and more, and this is extremely important and healthy because it's open horizon. First of all, it creates a new culture of togetherness for men in the inner battle instead of trying to battle each other on the streets and destroying the whole world in the process.
It's such a fascinating topic, and I truly hope I see how men, as you described, that they need forging. They're like this, a piece of metal that they seem a bit useless, and they don't feel they contribute to the world. And you see them after years of practice, they become this sharp sword, which both make I know a man is successful because his lover smiles. That's when you know he made his job well. She's happy. And you see him in his posture changes. And you think, how can we make it so that the men in the world will have the possibility of forging themselves in such a way as you described?
Well, by standing up, Foca, by doing this, by standing up for the truth, and you will see it will be a garbage storm, not to call it even worse, upon the men who will stand. But that's the destiny of heroes, and then there will be more and more saying, hey, you know what? I'm also standing, and I'm also standing, and I'm also standing for this. Enough is enough. Stop hitting all these things in a wrong way. We got the point. Let us fix it. Actually, we can fix it. Nobody else can fix it. And then when we will take responsibility of this masculinity and create a masculine culture in the world, healthy culture, sublime culture of masculinity, superior masculinity culture, this is going to appeal, because deep inside the heart of every man is a hero that is waiting to be unleashed. It's there. And then outside of the heart is a boy locked out, crying. Crying for what? For this hero to break the chains and stand up. This is in the heart of every man on the planet. I know some are so overwhelmed by the problems that they don't even dare to look in that direction. And that's the problem also. Then we say it's much easier to say, no, I can't do it. Yes, of course, that's part of your first step. You acknowledge you can't do it. However, keep looking at it. Keep looking and you will see, but perhaps I can try this. Good. That's exactly how it starts. And then that and this and that. Because what also the trick is for many people today, they expect this promise of a single jump evolution. Let's find a solution. There is no one solution. It's a path that becomes the solution. A path of 1,000 steps, which will always begin, as the Chinese were saying, with the first step. With one step. And that step doesn't have to be very big. Yeah? The path to a perfect orgasm is not one penetration, it's many penetrations. To put it in a masculine context that the guys don't understand. They are looking for the perfect, can I have it, the final penetration? Yeah. What are you? What do you think? Look in your body. Do you have a final heartbeat? Yeah, you have, in the end of life. All your life, you have heartbeat after heartbeat after heartbeat, which breath after breath after breath. Yeah, and that's how you evolve. So that's why I don't think there is a solution as such. It's a path that becomes the solution. Path of masculinity. We need to learn to live as men in the world. Learn to reconsider moral compass. Morality is in peril because of men. We made the compromises. We started to compromise our attitude. We destroyed our life because we started not to have the moral compass is what? The source of the most fertile positive challenge in life. You want challenges? Put there the standard, moral standard high, and you have good challenges for you as a man. And of course, It doesn't mean women will not need morality. No, they also need, and they are wonderful sometimes in doing it, sometimes in failing it also. But it stays with the masculine that we really need it. That's the problem. A man without morality disappears as a man. A woman without morality, she's still a woman, and okay, she has some minuses there in the chapter of morality, but doesn't destroy. Even the hormonal makeup doesn't get affected. But for the men, yeah, you make a compromise, suddenly you start to feel the softness where you wouldn't like it.
So kind of thinking about a conclusion for this fascinating topic, we say that there is a hidden hero there that awaits to awaken, like the sleeping king, the legend of Arthur here in England. And then, due to the ignorance that we have, that we even have that sleeping king that we long for in movies and so forth, we find all the long list of this very sad statistic that we mentioned. But then, when we awaken that inner hero, the king within, then it becomes the gift that you mentioned. And as you mentioned, it's through this rite of passage, going through those tests, understanding the archetypal form, removing the stereotypes, learning how to embrace intimacy, our emotional nature, standing up for what we believe. And as I will take from a lot of what you said, finding genuine ideals that bind us together, both as with group of other men and all the faculties of our inner psyche towards a sublime ideal. Can we say that will be a...
You concluded well. You concluded well. Thank you. Thank you, and I hope that this talk was useful for us, for the ones which will listen this, for the ones who will receive a link to this talk and who will manage to reach to this part of the talk, to the end of it, if they don't get triggered on the way. And even if you get triggered on the way, I hope you will express yourself in a civilized manner, in a lucid way, and take the challenge of seeing other opinions as well. This is it for the moment. Thank you, Foca, for joining me in this inquiry with such wonderful questions.
Thank you very much, Ava. It was a great insight for me, and I hope for all the men that will follow this, will have a dose of awakening for the sleeping king inside, the sleeping hero.
This topic will stay open, and I invite all men to put aside the misplaced pride and stand united to correct the situation in ourselves first. And because we can do it, I also call for all the men to say stop to this abusive consideration regarding masculinity, so that we can look at masculinity as a gift to humanity and not a menace. Now, please stay in touch and write your comments under this video. If you want to participate further, remember the invitation. Write your intention, your topic, and why is that topic important to you on the address that is listed on the screen, and that will be also placed under the audio podcast. And please remember that being alive is a continuous transformation. Therefore, embrace it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Continuous Transformation Podcast. For more episodes, articles, and events, visit advaitananda.com.